Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Norway Chess 2024 tournament. This will be a rare video here on the GothamChess YouTube channel, a double recap. A recap of rounds number 9 and rounds number 10. Generally, I am very diligent with uploading recaps after one game, but yesterday, June 7th, was a very, very, very long day for me. Those of you that are following the chess world closely know that there is a 3-day event going on in Madrid, Spain, which is where I currently am. The Clash of Claims, the 36-game match between Vladimir Kramnik and Jose Alcantara. Yesterday was day number 1, and it was a very, very, very crazy day. We are about 3 hours away or 2 hours away now from the beginning of day number 2, and day number 2 is not even guaranteed. The players are currently in negotiations with the organizers on how to proceed and whether to continue the event due to a technical malfunction of Vladimir Kramnik's laptop as it connected to chess.com because it was updating. It was in the middle of going through several Windows updates, half of which were failing, and it caused this connection to be intermittent and faulty, and essentially that is what is currently going on. So, let's begin the round 9, 10, and 9 recap for Norway Chess. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry. So, Norway Chess begins with classical chess, and then it moves to an Armageddon format of 10 minutes versus 7. And a man that has been playing very well is Hikaru. A man that has been playing not well at all is Ding. And one man who is kind of resurging is a man, you may know him, Norwegian guy, Magnus. So I'm actually going to jump ahead immediately to the Armageddon between Hikaru and Ding, because their classical game was relatively solid. Oh, cracked the neck. Here we go. This is a very nice way to avoid a lot of different lines that black could possibly play. You try to play for an English, but you're kind of playing it like a queen spawn, except you're not going to play the move d4. And notice how Hikaru plays the pawn to c4, disallows black from pushing it to d4, and then plays like this. He plays in a way where he's going to put 2 bishops like this. There's not a whole lot of theory here. It's just kind of a relatively balanced and, straightforward position. And Ding plays in a very classical, this is kind of a modern way, I should say. It's classical is, they used to take the center and they like this type of stuff. But Ding plays it in a modern engine way, which is occupying space in the center of the board. Then he takes, plays e5, and plays h6 to prevent Hikaru's bishop from going to g5. Now, again, friendly reminder, Hikaru has a 4-minute time advantage now, but a 3-minute time advantage at the beginning of the game because black has draw odds. So, very, very important. A3, okay? Rookie 1. Hikaru has kind of made maximum improving moves in this position. Now he has to do something. So he tries to attack with the kingside pawns, and he plays this g-pawn to g5. He then takes with the bishop. Now, visually, white's position does look like it makes a lot of sense. He has the pin, he has the knight, he has the advanced pawns on the queen side. He plays c5, and now he plays knight b2, trying to route the knight to c4 and pressure the center. But Ding plays this move, and suddenly Hikaru's position has a pretty significant question mark. Black is just gonna go e4. So, like, let's say white plays knight c4. Black can do a lot of things, but namely he can play e4, and the position suddenly becomes very, very difficult to play with white. Queen d7, Hikaru gets rid of the knight to open the position, but Ding just plays very solidly, and this attack is not really going anywhere. Ding plays king g7, Hikaru plays knight c4, but, I mean, look at Ding's king. That rhymed. Queen goes back to f3, and b4, and the attack continues, and Hikaru's trying to use his time advantage and kind of put pressure on Ding, who is clearly not playing at his top form in this tournament. But in this game, Ding absolutely methodically picked apart the white position and locked in his knight in the center, created a light squared pawn chain, and from start to finish, my friends, this game was all Ding Liren. And the last time that Ding Liren beat Hikaru in a game, he won the candidates. Excuse me, he got second place in the candidates, and then he went on to win the world championship. So, now, of course, it was a Armageddon, but yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah, that's, there you go. Ding gets the win over Hikaru, a big win, a big win, and it's a really nice thing to see Ding back in form Also in this round, we had Prague versus Caruana, and we had Alireza versus Magnus. Now, there was other Armageddons. There was the Armageddon between Pia Kramling and Anna Muzichuk, and I do just want to quickly show you this one, because this one was equal for a while, but then something kind of crazy happened, which happens in these Armageddons, which is why they're interesting to break ties with, but honestly a little bit silly. So Pia Kramling gets herself into this position, which is, 5 minutes versus 5 minutes. And again, remember, in the Armageddon, white has to win. Those are the rules. That is what you agree to. And she was slowly making progress, of course, but this position is a dead draw. Opposite colored bishops like this. We have B8, Queen A2. And yeah, even if you have the outside pass pawn with white, it is all still a draw. And then something completely unimaginable happened. As in a time scramble, in a position where winning chances were fading, obviously, it's just a draw, queen to d7, and Anna Muzichuk, and that is not a mouse slip. There are no mouse slips in over-the-board chess, and that, unfortunately, is life sometimes. Of course, as far as the Armageddon goes, this was not winnable for white, unless she tried to, dirty flag her opponent or something, but yeah, that does sometimes happen. Ju and June, Humpy Conaroo was another Armageddon, and then I will show you a, by the way, you will notice this is kind of a similar opening that Hikaru chose against Ding, although it was played slightly differently by Ju and June. In this game, black utilized her pieces to kind of put pressure on white's center. There are no pawns for black in the center of the board, and actually white occupies it completely, but it is black who is dancing around and putting a lot of pressure. Rook c8 is a very nice move, targeting the pawn on c4. b6 doesn't let that pawn go forward, and now knight b7 is looking to blockade. Honestly, it's bad news in the Armageddon when the person that starts up 3 minutes is down 1. That is a significant time turnaround, and Ju and June completely took over the dark squares, and just wait until the queen gets in. Just wait until your dad gets home. Just wait until the queen gets home. Queen f4, queen h4, obviously you don't want a queen trade. And just a fantastic game from Ju and June, like from start to finish, absolutely opening up the white position, looking for the way to get the queen in. Queen h4 is threatened. There it is. Bishop to d4, knight f4. It's all there. And she gives up the queen, wins this. And obviously she is just winning because knight to g3 comes in. She takes. She's going to run away with her rook. And I mean, Humpy basically plays on because you never know. Ju and June might fall asleep at the board or something, but... no, the king comfortably stops the pawns by returning to its home square. And Ju and June was in great form. She was playing fantastic chess. Like from start to finish in this event and proving that she is the world champion, and for very good reason. Prague versus Fabiano. Like I said, it's late in the event, so every game is basically going to an Armageddon. It basically turns into a little bit of an arcade game, which is why this format is very interesting, but ultimately it is a little bit strange. That the format kind of changes, that you can score your points in different ways. And I think unless you're like kind of a longtime fan of the chess world, it can be a little bit difficult to follow. Having said that, it's a unique format, and I kind of enjoy it, but... now the players are basically playing 8 versus 5 minutes. One side has 2 results to play for, and, here we go. Queen d2. Queen e6, and Fabiano just playing very solidly. He's keeping enough pieces on the board where the position is complicated. Now he begins attacking the pawn on a5, and he takes it. And if you ask me, why did Prague not go defend this pawn? I think he just didn't want to play a really passive move. Maybe he felt like the removal of the defense of d5 is bad and bishop f6 becomes a problem. Bishop f6 there would have taken the knight. And instead, he sacrifices a pawn and tries to create immediate counterplay, but it simply doesn't work. Now Fabiano has 2 outside pass pawns, and he plays rook c1. He plays bishop a5, trying to remove the knight. He plays queen c2, looking for a queen trade. And you cannot take the pawn on b3 for black because the queen is defending the rook. So we play queen c4. We just keep pushing, and now we just start pushing our pawns. We need to protect our king. We need to protect our queen, which we do, which is why they huddle together. Very adorable. And we play queen c1. We give up the pawn here, but we win the pawn on g5. And black's king is simply too weak, and the pawn on a5 is too strong. Having said that, it is still a complicated enough position that something stupid can happen. But now we are hunting the king, and we give up the pawn on a5, but the king is simply too weak for black. And bishop b4 wins. It wins because we are threatening queen e4, we're threatening queen d6 in many positions, we're threatening like various queen g4s, queen c4s, and this move is a fork, and it picks up the knight. And Prague goes down in the Armageddon to Fabiano, which is a nice result for Fabi, obviously, and he continues, he continues his event and trying to trying to score points, trying to get the job done, and I will move my crop a little bit down because I want some headspace. We're going to do a live crop here. Ready? Watch this. It's going to be magical. Dude. No, the camera's still popping out. I'm going to work on this together. But I want to move forward, but I don't want my gigantic forehead to pop out from the frame. Maybe it still will. Maybe it still will. Maybe there is just no way around having a giant face. Anyway, maybe I can move back. Look at this. Look at this magic. Wow. I'm so smart. It's hard to have this fancy camera. I don't really know how to optimize and use it in the best way. And there was a classical victory in the women's side in round number 9. E4 is a move to get completely out of prep. Lei Tingjie went to the confessional booth and said she just basically wanted her opponent completely out of preparation. As you can see from Vaishali's time management, she's not out of her preparation whatsoever. But you will also notice that Lei played a gambit. Lei played in a way that gave her opponent kind of a damaged structure, but an extra pawn, which is a trade-off. And yeah, c5, bishop e2, and now she's just basically going to try to win the pawn back. Now, as it turns out, the best way for black to play was not to play c5. It was not to activate her position. It was to play king b8 and play defense, and then put the knight in the center and wait. And that's very hard to do. That's why Vaishali spent about 30 minutes ultimately deciding to push this pawn one square. And Lei just very calmly and patiently didn't take the pawn, although here she could have maybe gone for knight b5. She plays rook d1, she stays very patient, and finally she takes the pawn back. And I think this waiting game, you know, forcing Vaishali to make moves, knowing that at any point she could just capture her pawn on c4 and maybe get a positional advantage, made it very difficult for Vaishali to play moves. And ultimately, the defensive setup that she chose, where the only difference in the position is the split pawns. But the problem is there are now such weaknesses in black's position that no matter what happens, black simply loses the pawns. And when I say loses the pawns, I mean quite literally, black loses all the pawns. So this was a genius opening idea from Lei. Lei basically said, look, we're going to get here, and I'm going to damage the structure and win these pawns back over time. I'm not going to win them back right away. I'm not going to play bishop e2. Like, let's just play solid chess. And tell me how within 10 moves, all the pawns are gone. Just all the pawns have been captured. Her pieces get in there. A very nice positional game. And she wins it by essentially building a checkmate net and disallowing the king from escaping. Her king is actually safe. It looks like it's not safe because of knight h2. It's completely safe. You threaten this. Okay, this is like a half checkmate threat, except it's not, because there is no mate here. b5 and taking and is game over. So a very nice game from Lei, who wins in classical. Now, another game, Magnus Carlsen, Alireza Firouzja, another game that was decided ultimately in the Armageddon, because I just don't think anybody wanted to play classical anymore. This bishop g5 line is something Alireza chose against Magnus in the classical game, and Magnus basically equalized and played in the most boring fashion possible. He took absolutely no risk. That's not a criticism whatsoever. That is, I mean, I think he just was like, I'm gonna play, and I'm gonna not lose this game, and you know, if he beats me, he beats me. The most provocative way to play by far is g5. That's actually what white is baiting. That is what the engine says is the top line of the, is the top line to play this move g5. Magnus basically says, no, I'm gonna wait. All right, knight bd2, bishop a7, castles, queen e7, and now, and only now, after making a couple more improving moves, like, this is an indication to Magnus, like, don't castle your king that way. Now and only now does Magnus, in fact, play this move g5. And it's always gonna be a good move. It's always going to be a good move. Alireza decides to sacrifice. Alireza decides, okay, it's Armageddon. I have to play for a win. And I'm going to sacrifice. But there is this move, knight takes d5. Activating the black queen to hit the bishop on h4. Now knight takes e6. So queen hanging, both knights hanging, rook hanging, queen takes h4. If you take on f8 here, if you take this guy, I'm going to take on c3, ruining your entire position before I take back. So we get here, we kick out the queen, and then we take the knight, and he takes back. And here, after the very simple and solid queen e2, Alireza is better. He's better because black's king is a little bit weak, and he's better because black's pawn structure is a little bit stupid. He has like the pawn on a6 and the pawn on h6 and this weird Tetris piece thing in the center. So he's slightly better, but Magnus, I think, has an easier position to play and very quickly doubles his rooks. Well, Alireza plays f3. The only problem with this position is how do you win it with white? Like, what do you do? Okay, we offer a queen trade, no queen trade. We play rook d1. You can't take the pawn because knight e4. Well, Magnus just keeps going, h5. Alireza plays knight b3. And maybe that's not where the knight wants to go, but he's trying to play knight a5 and win the pawn on c6. Magnus says, go ahead. Go ahead. And I'm playing like this to completely limit the white king's mobility. So the white king is maybe compromised. Alireza plays d4, trying to attack in the center. Takes. Magnus also strikes in the center. We're going to have this big clash in the center of the board. Alireza plays knight a5 indeed. The pawn on d4 gets captured. The queen goes to f7. Now Magnus is like, hey, let's trade. You have a really powerful knight. I have a good bishop, but let's trade because now all the pawns are going to fall off the board. Rook c1. But now suddenly, in this hesitation, Alireza has not really found the way forward, and he takes on a6, but Magnus is going to win the pawn on f3. And he does, but knight e7. But knight e7 was a winning move for Firouzja. If king g7, knight f5 disconnects everybody. If king h7, you can play queen e4 and then knight f5. Queen e4, let's say king h8. This doesn't quite cut it, but knight f5 is the winning move. And suddenly, it is black who is lost. This knight is completely dominant. g2 is covered. You cannot stop white from just playing like this. And then maybe playing rook f3 and rook h3. And you are just in a lost position with black. Knight to e7 here. But Alireza goes for this. But here, unfortunately, he is not winning. He transforms the position. He gets himself into a time trouble. d3 apparently is a race, and black wins it. d3, a5, d2 here, and this is the dagger. That is the dagger, rook to a3, but I think at this point both players were in a time trouble. Suddenly Alireza is coming back, but Magnus, I think, just saw this and was like, I cannot lose. Here comes Magnus's pawns, king f7, c4, and his pawns are simply too strong. So the king is never going to be able to go help white's pawn on a7. d5 holds everything. This position is simply lost. Of course, white can make a draw by trading off all the pawns, but a draw is a loss in Armageddon. Magnus gets the job done, seemingly, as always, in an endgame, in a very complex endgame, very back and forth game, but he was vulnerable there for a moment, and he beats Alireza once again. Now, can Ding Liren also defeat Alireza and continue his good run? This is the 10th and final round of action. These two drew their classical game, and Ding decides, I want to end the tournament with a simple opening, a straightforward opening, the London system. And this is one of the ways, the positional ways to play the London against the King's Indian with kind of a4, a5, this type of stuff. Very kind of solid, straightforward game. Ding goes for an attack very early. He takes a lot of the center, and he plays like rook d1, taking on Poussin. But somehow black gets all the fun. Every single piece in black's position is having fun. You cannot really tell me this bishop is having fun, or maybe this rook, right? Like, I mean, the position is bishop g5, queen e8, okay? Bishop h6. Bishop e4. One pawn has fallen. Ding is trying to attack, but he doesn't kind of have enough firepower. Suddenly, by move 20, Alireza is just in a position where he's a clean pawn up. So the opening did not go that great. The opening kind of felt like a grappling match a little bit, like the players were just rolling around on the floor, trying to capture each other's pawns and get each other into body locks. It's a very fascinating activity. And Ding sort of finds himself again just sort of in a squeeze. Alireza plays queen f7, which turns out to be a horrible move because the move f4 is really strong. And you walk directly into this. So if pawn takes, queen d4 is a completely winning shot. And Ding maybe thought f4, queen e7, which is also very reasonable. But we have bishop f3, bishop d5, and Alireza just simply goes for a queen trade. And this one was just never in doubt. Ding just resigns here. You say, what? He's one pawn down. Yeah. He's a pawn down. But he's about to lose his bishop. And even if you, even if you said you are not allowed to play c6, like this. Like, let's say black cannot go here. Black is just completely winning. I mean, black does not have a target. The knight has no access. Even, like, where can you even put the bishop safely? F2 is just a huge weakness. The knight comes to D3, and the position is lost. So that one didn't go great. Ding does, in fact, beat Hikaru, though, in the Armageddon. I think he's the only person that he managed to... He also beat Prague in the Armageddon, I think in, like, round 2 of the event. So Ding ultimately finishes in last place. We will take a look at that later. Alireza has kind of an okay tournament. One player who absolutely dazzled was Ju Wenjun, who in the last round plays again her opponent from the World Championship match, Lei Tingjie. This one was just a kind of a very boring game. Here, if players want to make a draw, they trade bishops there, then they agree to a draw in about 7 moves. This one was a bit more of an imbalanced game, where, as you can see, I mean, it's like very complicated. Basically, white is up a piece temporarily, the bishop on c6, but it's not really up a piece because you're pinned. But what's going to happen is the position will transform and white will win a pawn. And essentially, black in this position argues, yeah, you're up a pawn, but we have opposite colored bishops. Except she does it the wrong way. So the best way to play here is to leave a pawn on a7, play queen c8, because if queen a7, rook c1 is fatal. If you trade the queens like that, black dominates the only open file. And it's very important because if, let's say, oh, I guess there is rook c2 there, I apologize. Let's say f3, bishop f2, and let's say castles. Point being, you know, in the future, you will probably trade the rooks here or at least on the second rank. But what happens in this game is white doesn't allow that. And I think Lei went for this drawing line, you know, because thinking, okay, it's like an easy kind of hold. But the right way to trade the queens, which is kind of fascinating, is not to take with the pawn. It's to maybe take with the rook and control this file. So rook here, let's say b3. Then you play rook c6, king d2, rook c8. And the point is, if you trade all these pieces, the pawn is far. It's far away. However, what happens in the game is the pawn is close, and this is losing because you fix the pawn. The pawn can now not come off a dark square. The difference if you kept the pawn there, let me just show you. I know this is like very, very sophisticated stuff. Not to, you know, toot my own horn or anything, but the difference being, let's say all of this happened, you see, and the pawn stayed exactly where it was. Not rook c7, excuse me, rook c1 here. Let's say you brought the king and white started playing a4. And then, you know, you played king e7 and king c2 and not king c2. Let's say white is trying to play b4, b5. You can always play a6. White now has to go here. You get rid of your weakness. The king always plays defense, and it's a draw. It's just a draw. Opposite colored bishops, 1 pawn advantage. But watch what happens in the game. The pawn never gets off. And the point is that maybe you win this endgame. Maybe if you trade. But the point is now there is no need to trade. Like rook c1 is probably still a draw, but you don't even need to do any of this. And you go here, and you just break through. Your king gets there, your bishop gets there, and black is, yeah. Look at this. It's crazy how it just 1 square of difference, and that's it. And Ju Wenjun glides in with her king and her rook, marches down her opponent, just has to find the way in. Bishop b6, king b6, rook c7. Yeah, Lei is like creating all this counterplay, but she can never get off the back rank. This is the setup. Here, rook b8. I mean, you talk about like a, you know, like a moment of crawling to the other side of the board to put away the opponent's king. It's really impressive. And Ju Wenjun won. She ultimately won. The other matchups in the round 10 of the women's were decided in the Armageddon. And I will show you the final results. Prague versus Hikaru and Magnus versus Fabiano will end today's recap. So we have another London. Clearly, we did not have enough. Bishop b5. It's one of the ways to play. A lot of people are putting the bishop on b5 nowadays. Queen b6, c4. Okay? So queen b6 and c4. The bishop goes to the g4 square. Very provocative from Hikaru. I kicked the camera again, but it's really like kicking the camera. This is something I have not seen some sort of c4, bishop g4. Now white apparently has a major advantage after queen a4, but even knight c3 putting pressure on black's king is very, center is very annoying. And after dc, bishop queen c5, there was this very nice idea knight a4. This is a very, very dangerous game Hikaru is playing in the Armageddon because it's very tactical. When you're down this much time, you know, you're going to take a lot of risk. And Prague just kind of plays in a straightforward way and maintains like a near 4-minute time. It's almost 4 minutes and a better position. So Hikaru has these 2 pawns versus the 2 pawns. We actually saw this also in the game Lei versus Vaishali. Can I just show you this? Look, when she won her pawn back. See? It was AC versus AB. Hikaru, AC versus AB. This is what I'm saying. Like, pawn structures, they overlap in many games. It's important to kind of remember this stuff. And the pawns can be weak. And Prague plays just sort of very straightforward. And when Hikaru tries to trade his pieces, he now threatens a kingside attack. So Hikaru is defending the queen side. Now he's faced with a kingside attack. And he's continued to face with an attack on that side of the board as well. So he's just being pressured on all 3 sides. And he's down 3.5 minutes. BC, not the most accurate apparently. Maybe queen f3 and being a little patient was better. But Hikaru tries to turn this into a tactical mess. Prague keeps his nerves, keeps hunting Hikaru's king, shreds open his position. And my friends, that is mate. I mean, that is just straight up checkmate. I mean, you talk about a guy getting to the other guy's king. Bishop f8, queen g5, bishop takes. Queen g7 is unstoppable. You can play king f8. I'm still going to bring my rook e4, rook f4. I mean, you simply cannot do anything. And that is that. And that is that. Hikaru goes down in 2 games in Armageddon to end it. He must have ran out of energy a little bit. Prague winning a very, very nice game after going down to Fabiano. And the last game of Norway Chess 2024 is Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana. And fortunately or unfortunately, this one also did not last the classical game. This was an Armageddon. And it was some sort of weird kind of Queen's Indian defense. And Magnus stopped the bishop from coming to b4. Fabi played knight e4 anyway. Magnus traded and just played normal chess. He developed the bishop, right? So now black has some light squared weaknesses over there. Both sides castled, and Magnus took some space with the move b4. White is a very slightly bit better, but black is very solid and is immediately attacking white's position with a5. Now, Magnus doesn't really like to lock positions. He doesn't like to go here. I think he prefers to keep the tension, especially in Armageddon, where his opponent has to make tough decisions. He plays queen b8 because he wants to fianchetto the queen here and trade all the rooks. That is the idea. So Magnus understands, like, he needs a plan. He disallows Fabiano's idea with queen e4, and now the most critical approach is d5. If you take, the knight goes to f6, the pawn retakes on d5, but at least this kind of gives Magnus some squares to work with. So he plays knight e5, and supposedly it was better to take with the knight on d5 rather than the pawn. So now Magnus has a weak c6 square to play with. Plays b5, right? Weak c6 square. All right, there. Now we take. We take because actually queen e8 is a loss of time. Queen e8 allows us to play rook takes, and it's as if the queen has to make another move. It's as if black just lost the turn. I mean, it's basically as if we were able to play knight e5, b5, and take on a8, and then continue the game, right? It's interesting. Instead of that, black should have maybe traded rooks and played queen e8 to disallow this. Now we have rook a1, and you see how kind of everything that Magnus is doing literally stems from queen e4, d5, knight f6. He forced Fabiano, who he himself has said, Fabiano likes to do things in a forced, calculated way. Fabiano likes clarification in a position. He will find a way to do it in a forced and calculated way. Knight f6, and everything now revolves around the c6 square, just making things uncomfortable. Rook a7, now infiltrating, right? Black goes to create some sort of counterplay and brings his pieces, but the attack is not over. Now we put the knight on c6 to continue to ask questions, right? Now we play bishop a3, looking to trade black's powerful bishop, which we do. Now we play knight back to e5, continuing the pressure on the c7 pawn. Now we play f3 to kick the knight out of the center. It's not clean, actually. It's not like the most clean approach, but we are asking questions. Black is slightly worse. F3, however, allows Fabi a little bit back into the game, and suddenly Magnus's king is not particularly thrilled. He probably should not have played F3. Magnus should have taken Ben Feingold's advice. But now pressure is rising, and Fabiano has 45 seconds on the clock. Magnus plays knight to e5, discover check. Knight to e4 is a block check. So if you take, I take, we have this. Now we have this. E takes d5 is a discover check. E4 locks the door. Oh, Magnus's king is looking really weak. So he goes here, giving up the pawn on d5, losing the pawn on c7 and losing the pawn on b5. It's queen n4 versus queen n4. Very, very tense position. Queen f4, queen b1 check. And instead of queen in there, Fabi had to go here. He needed to pressure the pawns where if king h2 was played, b5 would now be in time. And he needed to monitor the d pawn. Losing a pawn on h4 with check does not matter because ultimately you need to defend your pawn, and I simply play b5. But because now you force me into this, now I win the pawn on h4. And the worst part of all is you don't threaten my pawn. So Fabiano, on the 42nd move of Armageddon, puts his queen on the wrong square. It's very natural. It's very natural. You give a check, you push the pawn. But he needed to centralize his queen. It's very important in queen endgames. You centralize your queen, especially in a spot like that, where you defend your own pawn, you monitor both. Instead, he put it there, and Magnus made him pay. Queen f5 check, a series of checks, and that's it. He's simply winning the race. And he wins the race. And not only does he win the race, Magnus Carlsen, for I think a 6th time now, wins Norway Chess 2024. Hikaru in 2nd. 700,000 Norwegian Nokia stock options. How much is 700,000 Norwegian krona in US dollars? I'm asking my phone. 65,000. Not too bad. Not too bad. Now Magnus can afford like a base model Porsche Macan or something. I don't know what he likes to drive. And as far as the women's side of things, it was Ju and June, and it was never in doubt. Anna Muzichuk had a bright spot, the bright second half in this event. Vaishali ultimately at 12.5, she was leading, but she slowed down a bit. I think she just needs a little bit of time, a little bit of experience. And Vaishali should be well on her way to ultimately winning these tournaments. But yeah, the experience prevailed for Ju and June and for Magnus. So quite fittingly, well, I was going to say quite fittingly, the world champions won this event. It's difficult to shake off the fact that Magnus is not actually the world champion. A lot of people keep making the slip. But that is the reality. And so Ju and June will defend her title against Tan Zhongyi. That is the winner of the candidates tournament, and Magnus will not be defending his title against anybody. But Ding Liren will be defending his title against Gukesh. Ding finished in last, but he did look very, very nice in that game against Hikaru, and I think the chess world in general hopes that he will make some sort of return to form and energy and motivation and so on. So that's Norway Chess 2024. Again, apologies I wasn't able to upload a recap yesterday. I traveled for about 4 hours from Sitges, Spain to... or I should say Sitges, technically, which is in Catalonia, and I don't know. There's a lot of mixed emotions in this part of the world about Catalonia and whether it's Spain or not. Listen, I'm just a dumb American, so I was in Sitges, and then I went to Barcelona, and I took the train to Madrid, and it was a very busy day the past couple of days. So Clash of Claims, though, that's what I'm going next. Get out of here.